Yo folks, welcome back to my channel. I'm delighted to be joined by Johnathan Sutherland, presenter of Sportsceen, as you always may be aware. Thank you for joining me, Johnathan.
My pleasure, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. So what got you into presenting?
That's a good question. I never really thought that I would be a presenter when I was growing up. I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I was growing up. I had a vague idea that I wanted to be a journalist. I'm not quite sure where that came from. There used to be a board game when I was growing up called The Game of Life. And I always remember playing it. And at the start of the game, you get a job. And there were like three options basically. You could become a lawyer, a doctor, or a journalist. And I think journalist was the highest paid. So I always went to be the journalist. So I think that's why I thought being a journalist would be quite a good idea. Unfortunately, that doesn't turn out to be true, that journalists get paid more than doctors and lawyers, but I only found that out later on in life. But I also just like writing. English was my favourite subject at school, so I always figured I'd be a journalist someday. But to be honest, I never really thought about getting into broadcasting until I finished university. I applied for a job as a newspaper journalist, work experience, and I got knocked back. And I ended up asking for work experience at a local BBC radio station in Shetland where I grew up. And they invited me in, and I started doing stuff for them. I'd never considered broadcasting at all. And then they got me in, did interviews with people, did little bits on air now and again. I was terrible at it for a long time. Slowly got better, and just kept working away and realized that I loved it. And I feel so lucky that I kind of fell into a profession that I really didn't think about at all when I was growing up.
What's your first footballing memory?
I think my first footballing memory was coming home 1986 to watch Scotland play Uruguay in the 1986 World Cup. And I just remember being deeply disappointed about how it all turned out, obviously. Uruguay were a very cynical team at that time, and obviously Scotland once again failed to reach the the knockout stages of the World Cup. Because at that time we qualified for the World Cup all the time, obviously, but we never made it past the group stages, and that was a big bugbear of Scotland's. Now you look back and think, we've not qualified for a major tournament for so long, we would give our right arms to actually be in the group stages at a World Cup finals, but you know, that's just how it was back then. So that's probably my earliest memory, coming home from out playing with my pals to try and watch this massive match. And it was a massive match at the time. Seems a long time ago now. I'm so old.
What made you present Sportsceen?
They asked me to do it, basically, after working for a long time at Bbcscotland, doing radio stuff, doing a bit of trackside stuff for TV as well. I was also an assistant producer at Sportsceen for a while. And I also did stuff for Reporting Scotland on screen. And so I had a lot of broadcasting experience by the time they asked me to do it in 2013. I've been broadcasting for about 14 years, about 12 years for the sports department in Glasgow. So I had a lot of experience in terms of doing stuff across TV, radio, online as well. And I just come back from working in Salford for the BBC down there, doing stuff for the BBC News Channel for the 2012 Olympics, and I'd done a bit of presenting on the BBC News Channel as well. So I came back and they asked me to do it, and that was basically it. You know, when I came down from Shetland to work for BBC Scotland Sport Department, you always had this vague idea that you think, well, I wonder how far I can go with this, you know, what can be achieved. You want to have an interesting life, you want to do things that interest you. You've got this vague notion that the best job in my profession to do would be to present Sportscene, and it was, you know, a kind of a dream. And you never know if you're going to make it. Obviously, you just work hard and hope that, you know, your hard work takes you as far as it can, and you try and realize your potential and just do the best you can and see what it takes you. So I felt very fortunate when they did ask me to do it in 2013, and well, I've loved it ever since. It's been just a fantastic privilege to be able to present Sportscene for the last 7 years.
What got you into the radio?
Well, radio is where I first kind of started making money, I suppose, Dan, because I got the knockback from the newspaper. They didn't have any work experience openings, and I was a bit crushed by that when I just left university. I just graduated from university, and I was thinking, oh, I'll get into newspapers, and there was no vacancies in Shetland at that time. So I thought, what am I going to do? So it's actually my mother suggested I write a letter to the local BBC radio station. So she's to blame for my broadcasting career. And I thought, okay. Like I said, I was very naive at that time, didn't know anything about broadcasting, never given it a second thought. But I was welcomed in with open arms to the local BBC radio station. And even though I was terrible, like really bad, like so nervous on air. I remember one of my first times I was on the radio in Shetland and just reading some stuff about like where the local jumble sales were going to be and, you know, local discos were going to be held, you know, one of those kind of events things. And I just remember he could hardly hear me speaking because I was shaking the paper so much. It was making so much noise on the microphone. I was so nervous. I was probably terrible for 12 to 18 months. Like really bad. You know, when you listen back to yourself for the first time and you hear your voice and you think, oh my God, do I really sound like that? I was like that for 12 or 18 months on air, broadcasting to real people. I can't believe they persevered with me for so long. Anyway, they did, thankfully. And I just listened back to myself and tried to cut out all the stuff that was terrible, get better, and that was it.
Favorite football player?
Roberto Baggio. You're probably too young to really remember him, but he was my favourite player. I looked forward to Italian 90 so much as a Scotland fan, and obviously I was crushed when Scotland lost 1-0 to Costa Rica. I think I was in tears because I'd been looking forward to it so much, and obviously Scotland let me down so badly. But I think sometimes those disappointments, they stay with you. I was determined to enjoy Italian 90 nonetheless. And I'd been intrigued by Roberto Baggio because just before the World Cup, I think he'd become the world's most expensive player when he left Fiorentina to join Juventus. And so there was a big story. I read Shoot magazine at the time. I don't think it's around anymore. But it was a big, big story. And there was riots in the streets of Florence when he left Fiorentina to join Juventus. And I thought, this is intriguing. This is, you know, fascinating, this whole Italian football culture. So then he scored the goal of the tournament against Czechoslovakia. And it was just an incredible moment. I was like, it kind of made me fall in love with the game again after the crushing disappointment of Scotland's defeat to Costa Rica. And because I'd been talking to all my pals about this guy, Baggio, he's really good. And everybody was like, shut up. And then suddenly he scores this amazing goal. And I'm thinking, yes. And so he was always my favourite player, you know, growing up. Brilliant player. You probably don't remember him at all.
No.
You're missing out. Look at the videos. The goals he scored were unbelievable.
What football
The
team
Divine
do you
Ponytail,
support?
Darren. You must have heard of him, no?
No.
No. I support... I always say Aberdeen. So when I grew up in Shetland, all my pals were Aberdeen fans. I think because their dads had kind of just recently watched Aberdeen win the Cup Winners' Cup against Real Madrid, so everybody was an Aberdeen fan. And so all my pals were Aberdeen fans. I don't really come from a football family. My family think football's a waste of time, basically. So I played football with my pals, so they all supported Aberdeen, so I kind of supported Aberdeen. But then, when I got a mind of my own, I decided I quite liked Dundee United as well because they were doing quite well in the UEFA Cup, and Kevin Gallagher was one of my favourite players, and I liked their orange strips, or tangerine, as you should say. And I liked Dundee United. So I know that's a bit weird. You know, Aberdeen fans shouldn't like Dundee United, But I like them both. So, and I'm from Shetland, so I don't care.
I'm presuming the only reason you like the orange kit is because that's how much fake tan Michael Stewart uses.
That's good banter, Darren. With that kind of banter, you'll get on Sportscene eventually. That's brilliant. Yeah. No, I don't think Michael Stewart's quite gone down the fake tan route yet. No. Is that what you think?
I think he does.
Oh, controversial. That's because you're a big Hibs fan and you're kind of course, Michael played for Hibs as well, though, so you must like Michael.
No.
Oh, brilliant.
Funniest thing that's happened on Sportscene before recording.
Well, nothing I can possibly repeat because that would just go into the papers, obviously, Darren, and it would be terrible.
It won't go into the papers.
To be honest, we take it disappointingly seriously. The whole day is because it's so important, Sportscene, to people. You know, you can't mess it up, or you try not to anyway. You got this massive sense of responsibility to every football fan because everybody comes to watch it, and so you just want to make it the best you can. So, to be honest, we take it. We have a laugh and a joke doing it, obviously, but we do take it disappointingly seriously. I mean, probably the funniest thing is Tomo, when he makes his weird animal noises in the studio before we go on air. Never really worked out what that's all about. He can do a dog. He can do kind of like screechy birds and stuff like that. He's always fiddling around with his like shirt and stuff to make sure that he's looking, the best he possibly can. So, you're always having to kind of put up with that. But of course, I don't really see Tomo that much anymore because he's doing the Sunday night program, and so I don't have to put up with his animal noises anymore. It's great.
Did you try turn into an animal? Is he going to be one of the people that buy the dog suits and live in a cage?
If anybody is going to be buying a dog suit and living in a cage, it's probably Tomo, right enough. No, I don't know.
Michael Stewart.
What?
Or Michael Stewart.
Nah, I think Michael's usually too busy looking at the latest political tweets. Before we're going on air for Sportscene, he's usually making sure he's across the political situation. And you're thinking, right, I need to talk about this Hibs handball, and I need to think about was that offside or did the referee get that right? And Michael's saying, seen this latest tweet about some political situation going on, and you're like, my head's about to explode with football stuff, and he's basically trying to work out what's going on in Holyrood. So it's always trying to just make sure that we get on air and we actually talk about football once we get there. And usually we manage it. Yeah.
Does your job get more easier the more times you do it?
Definitely. I think that's the same with anything in life. The more you practice, the better you get. And I just remember it was a huge challenge. Darren, sorry, on that note, my doorbell's just gone. Can we pause this? Is that okay? Just 2 seconds.
I think we can pause it.
Don't worry, I'll be back in a sec. Sorry about that. The perils of working from home. That was a delivery. So sorry about that, Darren. So you're asking me about...
Does your job get easier the more times you do it?
I think it's like everything else. The more practice you get, the better you get at it. And that's undoubtedly true with a program. Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else, you want to get good at something. I totally believe that, like I said earlier, I was a hopeless broadcaster early on. Some people will say I still am. But I think what I managed to prove to myself was that you can get better at anything if you put your mind to it and you really want to do it. I think it's just having that motivation factor to want to get better at something that's the key. I was listening to some interesting podcasts recently. I was one from the gymnast, actually. I think it's Max Whitlock. And his dedication was unbelievable. Like, when he was 12 years old, he left Britain to go and live in Slovenia on his own because his coach moved to Slovenia. And I think in gymnastics, you know, having that sort of bond with your coach is so all important that he made this incredible life decision to go and live there, learn Slovenian, train, and eventually it all paid off because he starred in all these Olympics and won gold medals and all the rest of it. And the reason he did that was because he was motivated to do that. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but you know, I think in life, we're all kind of struggling to work out what our motivation in life is and what we want to do with our lives. And I was so lucky that I stumbled into broadcasting and realized that I loved doing it, and I got a buzz off it. And because of that, I was able to just work at it. And now I get the biggest buzz from doing Sportscene and trying to do it to the best of our abilities and keep on working at it to make it as good a program as possible. And I feel like we've always managed to try and make improvements to it. I just think, look back at this past weekend, and it was an Old Firm derby on Saturday and all the Premiership matches, and I think it was an excellent programme. The analysis, in particular the Old Firm derby analysis, it doesn't get any better than that. Neil McCann and Michael Stewart were fantastic in terms of dissecting the match and explaining it to a wide audience, why it was that Rangers were so dominant in their 2-0 victory against Celtic. And I think that's what it's all about, trying to bring football to a mass audience in a way that's engaging, that's interesting, that's instructive, that's enlightening, and hopefully fun as well. And you're always trying to make it that way, make it the best way you can. And that still makes me feel good. That still makes me excited to do the job that I do. And I think as long as you've got that motivation factor, you'll always keep working hard at it because you just want to be the best you can be.
What's the funniest thing that's happened on Sportscene?
There was one time, I remember really at the start of, I think it was actually my first ever Sportscene back in 2013. And I was actually, Michael and Tomo were the guests that day, because back then we used to rotate the guests, but and then after that it became kind of Michael and Tomo for a while. But then it was, so my first Sportscene was Michael and Tomo. I remember Tomo was still playing at that time, and I and I remember it was a question about, you know, it must be difficult for you players when you retire. And Tomo just looked at me and was like, I'm still playing. And it was almost like I'd completely forgotten that Tomo was still playing at that time, because he was still playing for St Mirren. And obviously, he thought in his head that his performances had become so unmemorable to me that I didn't realise that he was still a player. It doesn't sound that funny in the retelling of this story, but at the time we all just cracked up laughing on air. And there's nothing worse, or there's nothing better than cracking up live on air. The other funny story, it was actually when we did Sportscene Extra. It also involves Tomo. Typically, it was so funny. We actually did this thing called Sportscene Extra for a while, which is basically a Facebook Live where we got lots of interaction from fans and discussed football issues of the day and so on and so forth. And one day we did it from Tomo's house, which was quite good. You know, Tomo's massive mansion in Renfrewshire. And our producer had brought all these pictures of Michael Stewart and kind of other football people and stuff, just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. And I remember we were wrapping up at the end, and I was kind of saying, and Tomo, you're going to be on Sportscene Results with Willie Miller at the weekend. And he was like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, well, I see we got a picture here of Michael Stewart, but no picture of Willie Miller. And Tomo was like, yeah, but I'm a big fan of Willie's. And then at that point, we just absolutely collapsed. It was so funny. It was one of those moments where you just couldn't actually speak. and you're live on air. And yeah, that was probably the funniest moment.
I wouldn't expect anything less from Tomo.
No, exactly. I mean, I'm always a bit disappointed because Tomo is a very funny guy, larger than life. But he sometimes reins it in a little bit for on TV because he wants to come across as being, you know, I don't know, respectable. But I say to him, you just let it all hang out, Tomo. But I think he's a bit worried he'd be taken off the air.
Who's the most interesting person you've interviewed in football and why?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. I really couldn't think. I feel like I've interviewed thousands of people. And you're asking about football in particular. And I really can't, you know what? I always found Walter Smith quite interesting in the sense that you always felt like you were interviewing your headmaster, which was a bit intimidating. You know, it kind of felt like a bit weird because, you know, that's because he just had that kind of presence about him, I suppose. And I felt probably at the time I was a bit of a kind of Johnny come lately. But I don't know. He was very interesting always. I think Neil Lennon's fascinating interviewer because he's so honest all the time. And you just want people that are honest, I suppose. I wouldn't pick out anyone massively in particular because everybody's kind of interesting in their own way. But obviously it's kind of the big pressure situations, cup finals and stuff like that when, you know, you're doing the interviews. It's a boring answer. I understand that, but yeah, I think, you know, these big personalities are the ones. There's no massive interview I would pick out. Sorry, that's a terrible answer. And I knew you were going to ask me it as well, and I've obviously prepared the terrible answer. But I struggled with that question actually. Yeah, don't know why.
No. That's entirely your question. What's the best night out you've had through football?
You know what? There was a really good night out that we had one time, and it's funny because it's like we had when we were kind of doing Scotland matches abroad. You know, sometimes you'd find yourself in a really kind of nice place, and like abroad, obviously, and you'd have some good nights out there. I always remember just, you know, sometimes you'd have a big night out after a Scotland match, maybe in European city abroad, and yeah, you go out for a few beers afterwards, and you sometimes, you know, have people knocking on the door the next day to make sure you wake up in time to get to the airport for the getting back the next day. So we had a few of those back in the day when we were kind of covering Scotland matches abroad. And even no matter what the result was, you just kind of felt like you had to kind of enjoy it because football is there to be enjoyed. So yeah, we made sure we enjoyed it. We get a bit older now, Dan, you know, I'm 43 years old, so I can't take a hangover anymore. So I've had to kind of tone that down a little bit.
Have you ever been out on a night out with Tomo and Michael Stewart?
Yeah, I have, yes.
Who's the most annoyingest drunk?
Probably me. No, I wouldn't say. Oh, probably, I don't know. No, we've had a couple of drink sessions after, you know, a successful season of doing Sportsceens a couple of times, and that was good. But it never got too out of control. There was nothing too madcap about it. Just a good bit of chat, but a few hangovers the next day.
So Tomo never came out with any animal noises?
He comes out with animal noises all the time, Dan. It's kind of does that when he's sober, to be honest. But he manages to rein it in when we're in a public area.
Who's the daftest out your co-presenters, Michael Stewart or Tomo?
Yeah, it's got to be Tomo, isn't it? Because Michael is Michael's so interested in his politics, obviously, he's quite serious about that. He's always, talking about political points. You never, ever want to get in a political debate with Michael because, you're never going to know more about politics than Michael. And even if you feel like you're completely right, you're never going to be able to convince Michael that he is wrong if he feels strongly about something. So definitely Michael, in terms of the politics, probably keeps him a little bit more serious-minded, whereas Tomo doesn't care about politics too much. I don't think it's fair to say.
Oh. What were you like as a kid? Did you always want to be a TV presenter?
No, I mean, like I say, as I was growing up, who's this? When I was growing up, I didn't even think about being a TV presenter. I was like thinking if I was going to do anything when I was older, and I never really thought about it. I thought it would just all happen naturally, and I don't know, it would all be fine. In fact, even when I went to university, I wasn't even thinking about what I wanted to do. I went to university and studied English, history, politics, ended up with a politics degree, but I wasn't really with the mind to thinking, I want to get into politics. In fact, if anything, getting a politics degree kind of made me think, I don't want to get into politics. That's for sure. That's what I've learned from my politics degree. I'm not going to get into politics. But I always kind of thought journalism at the back of my mind. But I always thought kind of like print journalism. I always thought it'd be like, that would be my thing. So no, I mean, broadcasting just came in. I was very lucky, actually. So lucky that I kind of fell into broadcasting, and it's been, that's how life is sometimes, isn't it? You take an unexpected turn and it turns out to be the most important turn of your life. And I feel so fortunate that I feel always so grateful to my mother. And it sounds so funny. Like, if she hadn't actually encouraged me to speak to the local BBC radio station, then who knows what I would be doing now. I really don't know. So sometimes listen to your mother. Not all the time though, obviously, but yeah, it's just sometimes life, fate, and all the rest of it just takes an unexpected turn and turns out to be hugely important.
What was it like being on TV for the first time?
Pretty terrifying, I would say. I remember back at Queen Margaret Drive when the BBC was there in Glasgow. It was quite old school, kind of felt like, and quite intimidating going into the studio. Not really having any experience of doing much TV, and then just kind of being thrust into a television studio in front of a camera. Yeah, it was unbelievably terrifying, I think that's fair to say. Because it's such a steep learning curve. Suddenly you're just completely aware that there's, so many people watching you, and you better not mess it up, sort of thing. And then you've got all the people talking in your ear, obviously, which is new when you're doing it the first time. And yeah, it kind of felt like you're going on a roller coaster and you think you're going to die. Then it kind of felt like that.
Once, but your football idols.
Like I say, Roberto Baggio was my favourite player growing up. I just thought he had this kind of otherworldly bit of style and panache and creativity. It was just cool. Scottish players, I liked Gordon Strachan when I was growing up. He was one of my favourite players when he was for Aberdeen and then moved to Manchester United. And then I really liked the way that he continued playing until he was 40, which was unusual at the time for Leeds United, and won the last old First Division title. I thought that was hugely impressive. And as I say, I was a big fan of Kevin Gallagher and a lot of that Dundee United team, Mixu Patalainen. Yeah, so that kind of forward creative players were always my favourite players, yeah.
What inspires you?
Sorry?
What inspires you?
That's a good question. I've got two sons now, and I think when you have kids, it kind of makes you want to change how you think about life. And it used to be just about me in terms of doing as well as I can. Now I kind of think, I want to do as well as I can for them. And, just, you only get one shot at life as well. That kind of inspires me. You only get one shot at life. You don't want to be kind of like, at the end of your life and thinking, I wish I'd done X, Y, and Z. I'm really happy to be doing what I'm doing, really proud of what I've been able to do, and I enjoy what I'm able to do, and it still inspires me itself, the job. I can't imagine doing anything else actually at this moment in time. So that inspires me, just the fact that get out of bed each day, give it your best shot each day. And I think especially in these times of lockdown, you've just got to kind of revel in the moments of the small things that you enjoy in life. And I'm so lucky I totally get that, to be able to do this job, a job that I know lots of people would like to do. And I just want to give it my best shot and, do it justice. It feels like a huge responsibility to present Sportscene, because everybody feels like they've got an ownership of Sportscene, quite rightly. Everybody grew up with that. And so I just want to always feel like the next programme was even better than the last one. And so little things like that just inspire me.
Are you ever nervous before going on TV?
Yeah, I think you are. I think you don't want to mess it up. I think the start of any show is like so important. And I think a lot of people, rather than talking about being nervous, kind of talk about being excited before they go on. And I think that's a good way to look at it. Nervous is obviously kind of got a negative connotation. Excited is more, positive. So I think if you just look at it that way, that sense of, I've got to make sure it's good, then you can use those kind of nerves, which everybody gets as they do broadcasting, and use that as a positive. So yeah, I think no matter how long you do it, you never want it to be crap. You want it to be good, and you're always kind of a bit worried that it might, something might happen that makes it crap. So I suppose that's kind of where that tension comes from sometimes. But we've done it so many times now. You always have to keep in your mind, like, we know how to do this, good at doing it, and or we think we're good at doing it, and we'll just try and keep on doing it. There's no reason why it should go awry. So not that nervous, to be honest. More kind of excited. You always have to look at it as this great opportunity that we have to be able to talk about football and show football. How can you not be excited about that? Yeah, there's nerves, obviously, because there's hundreds of thousands of people watching, but it's not a life or death situation either. So you have to bear that in mind too.
Do you ever watch yourself back?
I do, yeah. I think it's important actually to do that. I think if you're going to get better at doing something, I think you need to analyze, what you've done before, and look at what was good, what was bad, what was indifferent, what you would change, etc., etc. So yeah, I think it's an important part of the learning process is to review what you've done. I think in any walk of life, and alter it or continue it or just learn from it. So life's a continual learning process, and I think it would be unwise not to watch yourself back and think, what can you do better? But I think that's true in any walk of life. I think no matter what you do, you should always be trying to improve on what you're doing. So it keeps life interesting as well if you're always trying to improve.
Who do you look up to?
I don't know, to be honest. I feel like Dougie Donnelly and Archie Macpherson I've got massive respect for, because obviously they've done this role before and are legends in the role. I used to work with Dougie a little bit back in the day when I was kind of more behind the scenes, and he's a great guy. I have huge respect for him. But Archie, I've kind of probably spoken to more in recent years, just doing bits and pieces, and I think he's a fascinating person, and just so sharp and so great use of language, and obviously great history in the game. So massive respect for them. You know who I think is a really great presenter, who I think is just very good, and I think he's completely underrated as well, although he's doing very well for himself, obviously, is Hugh Edwards, that does the news at like 6 o'clock, you know, the Welsh guy. I think he's great. He's just got that kind of understated way about him, and people don't really think too much about him sometimes because he's kind of taken for granted, but I just think he's very polished. And Gary Lineker's obviously very good. I mean, Gary Lineker's a brilliant presenter. Dan Walker, Jeff Stelling's got his own great style. You know, these are really excellent people. So you learn. I think you just watch people, you learn, you take what you like, and you know, everybody's got a different take on who's good and who's bad and whatever. I just think the best thing you can try and do is just be the best version of yourself at the end of the day. I think that's what you should always be striving for in terms of broadcasting. It's just, if you can go in and be yourself as much as possible, then you're winning.
So you studied politics at Aberdeen University. How did that come about?
Well, I was always going to go to university. That was always the plan, just because I wasn't really thinking about anything else. And I was going to study English at university. But when I got there, I didn't really like it that much because it was all about Chaucer and poems and stuff that I didn't really feel like I was very good at understanding. So I moved kind of to history, which I kind of enjoyed to an extent. But then I also did a bit of politics, and I just found the politics more interesting, basically. So I kind of ended up making Union's influence on Finnish domestic policy as my dissertation. It seems like crazy to I'm thinking now. It sounds so boring. I learned a lot about Finland's president Urho Kekkonen, which is probably interesting to Finnish people. Anyway, so that's what I did. Yeah, politics. I was interested in politics, and it was stimulating. But as I said earlier, I never really thought I was going to get into politics as such. But I always thought it would be quite a good sort of base for getting into journalism. So that was it, and it probably has been.
So obviously you first started on Radio Shetland.
Yeah.
Again, how did that become about? What was...
Darren, I've got a phone call here from my girlfriend. I'm going to have to stop this. It's an emergency. Can we just stop this just now? I'm really sorry.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Hopefully still broadcasting to some capacity. I'm really sorry, Dan. I've got to take this call. It's from my girlfriend. Hello?
So, thank you so much for taking your time out, Johnathan Sutherland. It's much appreciated.
Dan, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.